All right, let's talk about something that feels incredibly modern: disillusionment. But we're going to look at it through a story that's actually, believe it or not, 2,000 years old. So let me ask you something. Have you ever been sitting in a service, maybe listening to a sermon that's all about guaranteed health and wealth? You know, a version of grace that just seems to skip over the hard parts of life, and you just get this feeling in your gut that something's off? Like, wait a minute, this doesn't really line up with the world I actually live in? Well, if that's you, you are definitely not alone. I mean, not by a long shot. That feeling, that little nagging question, it's not some new thing. It's a theme that goes right back to the very beginning of the faith. And guess what? There's a guide for us, someone who walked this exact path. And that guide? Well, he takes us straight into a massive conflict from the church's earliest days, a fight that revolved around one of its absolute key players. And here he is, the Apostle Paul. Look, even if you're only vaguely familiar with the Bible, you've probably heard of this guy. He was a total giant in the early church, a missionary, a deep thinker, and man, could he write. Just to give you an idea of how huge his influence was, get this: 48%. Almost half of the books in the entire New Testament were written by him. I mean, that's insane. His letters are literally the bedrock of so much Christian belief. So yeah, when Paul has something to say, it's probably a good idea to listen up. But here's the fascinating part. Paul's biggest fights, they weren't with the Roman government or people outside the church. Nope, they were with insiders. He even had a sarcastic nickname for them: the super apostles. These were these super charismatic, popular speakers who'd run into the churches Paul started. And, well, they'd start twisting the message, offering a shinier, more appealing, easier version of Christianity. So you might be thinking, why should we trust Paul over these other guys who sounded so great? The answer is all in his backstory. And trust me, it's one of the most radical transformation stories you'll ever hear. Okay, so before he was the Apostle Paul, he was actually the church's worst nightmare. I'm not exaggerating. He was a die-hard persecutor. He was so zealous that he hunted Christians down, had them thrown in jail, beaten. He was all in on stopping this new movement. But then came the road to Damascus. Everything just stopped. He has this insane, blinding encounter with the risen Jesus, the very person he was trying to stamp out. This wasn't just a change of mind. It was a complete 180-degree flip that turned him from Christianity's #1 enemy into its most fiery champion. And you better believe an experience like that gives you a crystal clear sense of what's real and what's fake. From that moment on, Paul spent his life making one thing incredibly clear: the difference between the true gospel and the shiny, counterfeit versions being peddled by those super apostles. Okay, this chart right here breaks it all down. It's the two gospels, head to head. You've got the super apostles on one side. For them, if you were suffering, well, that must mean you don't have enough faith. Their whole message was about what God can do for you. Health, success, you name it. A theology of glory. But Paul, he taught the complete opposite. He said, no, suffering is part of it. It's expected. His focus was on a relationship with a Savior who actually suffered too. It was a theology of the cross, where true strength is found when you're at your weakest. And Paul did not hold back. Seriously. For him, this wasn't some friendly debate over small stuff. He wrote to the church in Corinth and straight up told them, these guys are preaching another Jesus and a different gospel. He saw it as a toxic, dangerous fake that was pulling people away from what was true. And really, that's the heart of the matter, isn't it? The super apostles were all about the flashy stuff, the instant wins. Paul was offering something deeper, something tougher, more resilient, but way less glamorous. He was teaching about a faith that could actually get you through the tough stuff in life, not a magic trick that promised to make it all disappear. So, why does any of this ancient drama matter to you and me right now? Well, it means that feeling of disillusionment we talked about at the start, it might actually be a good thing. It could be a sign that your spiritual gut check is working perfectly. It's not a dead end, it's an invitation. Just let that sink in for a second. All your questions, your doubts, that feeling that something just isn't right with a gospel that's all about health and wealth, that isn't a sign to just give up on faith. It might be the exact thing you need to push past the shallow end and find something authentic, something that'll actually last. So I'll just leave you with this to chew on. What if that disillusionment you're feeling isn't the exit ramp? What if it's the entrance? The doorway into a faith that's deeper, stronger, and more real than anything you've known before. What if this is actually the start of your journey to find that less flashy but so much more profound gospel that a guy like Paul gave his entire life for?